In this video, the plan is to put vampire crabs to the side for a minute and create a simple yet beautiful Iwagumi style aquascape in this super shallow aquarium. I'm going to try and keep it fairly simple, and I'll be using some maple stone for this hardscape. I haven't used this stuff before, but the texture is awesome and it even has some really cool little crystals embedded into it. The tank is 60 by 35 by 20 centimeters or 23.6 by 13.7 by 7.8 inches. It's an odd sized tank, but I had it made specifically for this shelf. Rather than spend ages configuring the hardscape, I put something together off screen to save a little bit of time. Though this did take me a few hours to organize something that I was going to be happy with. This is my planned hardscape, though it might change a little bit by the end of the build. And it's probably a little bit too central for the purists out there, but I'm quite happy with it, so I'm going to leave it how it is. Normally I would place some glass protection down before adding in my hardscape, followed by my aquasoil, but this time I'm going to be adding the aquasoil first and then putting my stones on top. And I'm going to be using about 6 liters of this Yakuchi Jibun stuff. I'm not sure how good it is, but it seems to work really well from my experience, so that's all I need. The main thing is that it works really well with Monte Carlo, and that's going to be one of the primary plants I'm going to be using for this build. I've tried a few other aquasoils recently. They're all pretty average, so I'm just going to stick to something that actually works and isn't too expensive. I'm also breaking another fairly common rule here. I'm going to be keeping the entire soil layer flat, and I'm not going to be building the back up to create any sort of depth or scale, which is something that most aquascapers do. While that is a very good system, it's not quite the style that I have in mind here, which you'll see by the end of this video. I also plan to have a little interesting arch connecting these two islands together, but I don't really know if I like it, so drop a comment below and let me know what you think. Is it better with it or better without it? For my plant selection, I'm using Monte Carlo as my carpeting plant. It's an easy to grow classic that doesn't actually need CO2 to grow, and it will grow perfectly fine with a good light and good aquasoil. However, CO2 does give it a nice little boost. Annoyingly, some of the plants I ordered for this build came in quite a bad state, basically just mush in a cup. So there is going to be a slight bit of change here. Just so you know, if this does happen, don't be afraid to reach out to whoever you bought them from and ask for new ones. Most sellers will usually send you replacements pretty quickly. So as is usual, I'm going to be breaking down the plants from the cups into small little clumps that are ready and easy to plant. You can get quite a few plants out of a cup, though I'm not aiming to spread these out too far, so I am going for slightly bigger groups than usual. First plant going into this tank is Lobelia cardinalis mini, followed by Armania SP Bonsai. It's going in the back right hand side, and it seems to grow quite slowly, so I hope it doesn't get too smothered by the other stem plants that are going to be going in later on, so I'll have to keep an eye on it. The original build was also to put the Pogostemon halferi along the outer edge on the outer side of the Lobelia cardinalis, but it hasn't arrived yet, so again you'll see that later on in the video. That pretty much only leaves me with the Monte Carlo to plant, and rather than planting this into the soil like most people usually do, I'm going to be using Yuri's latest dry start method, which worked really well for this build. So all you have to do is basically start breaking down the Monte Carlo into quite small pieces, then just lay it across the surface of the aquasoil. Make sure to cover as much of it as you can, and once you have it all in place, give it a light to medium spray, just enough to push the Monte Carlo into the soil to give it full contact. After spraying everything, add some springtails to deal with any mold flare-ups and decay that happens. Then all you have to do is cover the tank and mist it a few times a week. Just don't let it fill up with water too much, otherwise you're going to have a list of other problems. After a little over 6 weeks, I filled the tank with 50% RODI water and 50% tap water. While I waited for the dry start process to complete, I had my little hang on the side canister filter here, a little SUNSUN filter, just cycling in another tank. That way I would be fully ready to add fish on day one. For the fish selection in this tank, I'm going with the classic, the Celestial Pearl Danios. I've got about 20 of them in here, about a quarter of which I bred myself, as well as a small school of pygmy cories and a group of red cherry shrimp. There's also a handful of ramshorn snails in here, which are really handy for keeping things nice and clean. If you haven't tried this combo of Celestial Pearl Danios, pygmy cories, and cherry shrimp, I highly recommend it. It's a really good combination, and if you set your tank up right, everyone will get along really well. A few weeks later, I added this interesting little water monitor from Cactoily, I think that's how you pronounce it. They sent it over and it monitors 7 different water parameters in real time. It works in both freshwater and saltwater. In this tank, some of the information won't be useful, though after testing it in this aquarium, I'm going to move it over to my new macroalgae tank and give it a test over there as well. The setup is super simple, just unbox it, choose the mounting option you want to use, either the bracket or the suction cups, then place it somewhere in your tank, just making sure to be aware of the max water line. The only real downside to this device so far that I've found is its size. It's probably better suited for all-in-one tanks, tanks with the sump, or tanks with immersed growth so you can hide the unit. The best part is everything is pre-calibrated, so there's no time wasted calibrating the unit, though there are some extra calibration options so you can recalibrate it if there are issues down the track. Once you've got it set up, just download the app onto your phone, connect it to the Wi-Fi, and all the data will start rushing through. So it measures temperature, TDS, pH, salt, SG, specific gravity, ORP, oxidation reduction potential, it's a bit of a complicated one, and electrical conductivity, so EC. I won't go over all of these things in major detail as it will be here all day, but Tropiscape Aquatics YouTube channel put a really good video together on all of this stuff, so I do highly suggest checking that out. I'll leave a link in the description for that one. It goes into a lot of detail with SG, ORP, and EC. It's definitely worth checking out. After you have everything set up, you can view your aquarium water stats on a little device screen, or you can fire up the mobile app and view it all there. Personally, I think the most interesting feature about this is the history option, which allows you to track exactly how each parameter has been doing over a monthly period, which allows you to pinpoint any water changes that might have led to some issues. The only thing I don't like is that it's not a 28-day rolling average or a 30-day rolling average. Does reset after each month, so from the first it'll reset at the end of the month. They'll probably update that in the future though. As with everything in this hobby though, stability is key, so you want to see nice flat gradual changes, and while this data is really handy in freshwater systems, I think it will be even more useful for people who have saltwater tanks. And I'm going to be moving mine over to another saltwater tank, so keep an eye out for that video in the future. So it's been a few weeks since I filled up the tank. I think it's about 3.5 weeks, and here's how things are going so far. The Liquidia ovalis grows insanely fast, so I've ended up splitting it into small little patches just on the left and right side of the back wall. Once it gets a little more dense, I think it's going to look a lot better. At the front, the Pygostomon halferi is doing really well, though it's probably because it's been getting a fair bit of CO2. Once I filled the tank up, I went pretty heavy with the CO2 for a while. But my favorite plant so far by a mile is the Lobelia cardinalis mini. And so far the only plant that's not really making an appearance is the Amania SP bonsai, but it's a pretty slow growing plant, so this is super normal as well. Here's a little peek of it just starting to pop up through at the back. The central clump of the Pygostomon yardabinus is going nuts as well. I pretty much trim this once a week, so it might have been a little bit too much of an aggressive choice for a shallow tank. And interestingly, and also super annoying, the Monte Carlo melted back quite a bit in a couple of sections, but it's just in these sections, which is kind of weird. It's starting to fill back in now, and some areas are really dense while these little patches have a few little holes, so it is just part of the process. I've also got a few other fish in here at the moment, a small group of ember tetras which are going to be rehomed at a later date, and a pair of hillstream loaches that are just chilling in here until their breeding tank grows a lot more algae. That pretty much sums up how everything is doing so far. So if you want some more updates on this tank and updates on just about anything, I usually post that sort of stuff over on Instagram, and I also dropped the website a couple of days ago, so if you want some help with other guides or tutorials, there's going to be a ton of those over there. Mostly crab guides for now, but definitely go check it out while you wait for the next video. And as always, cheers everyone, see you in the next one.